Getting on with it. All right, everybody, how you hanging in there? Everybody awake? All right, prepare to go to sleep. All right, so I am so inspired from these conversations. I totally geek out. I have like 19 pages of notes. I don't know about all of you, but this is great stuff. So that's about to stop. Be forewarned. So great to meet all of you. I lead open innovation and crowdsourcing for GE. We started down this journey about 6 years ago, and we're just really kind of getting started. So the the talk today is technically supposed to be about internal versus external crowds, pros, cons, and of course, you know, true to my nature, I just as I started to get going, I just really started to put a lot of thoughts to page. So you're going to get a lot more than internal versus external here, but really. When I started thinking about internal crowds and external crowds, I really started asking a lot of questions, right? What is an internal crowd? What is an external crowd? And I tend to believe fundamentally in kind of a world without borders and a world without kind of boundaries. And when I think about the crowd, I think about the team. And when I think about crowdsourcing, I tend to think about crowdsourcing is kind of what human resourcing and sourcing want to be when they grow up, or maybe conversely, crowdsourcing is kind of the digital teenager of human resourcing and sourcing. Right, so I think of internal and external crowds as a two sides of a coin, and not necessarily a binary kind of discussion. So when we are crowdsourcing internally, I think of the work that we're doing with internal crowds as being influenced to some degree or to a great degree by external crowds. And vice versa, we really fundamentally don't crowdsource externally without pulling in some of the internal crowd for that engagement. So internal crowds and external crowds fundamentally are synergistic. It's just a degree to which you combine the two in the work that you're doing. So. Questions that we're going to get started with here today. When should I crowdsource? When should I crowdsource internally? When should I crowdsource externally? What are the pros and cons of each? We're going to talk about those in terms of kind of a hybrid approach and degrees of engagement of different types of communities on a continuous spectrum, if you will. And fundamentally, the question that I just keep coming back to, which really is kind of how we organize our crowdsourcing within GE, and we'll get into this, is ultimately how we can drive greater value into our work systems, right? So if we think about the missions that our investors entrust us with, and the missions that our customers entrust us with, and how we drive the greatest value between those two ends of the value chain, right? The work that gets done in between is kind of in scope for what we're solving for, right? So we are solving for work systems that are executed by teams of experts, whether those experts are internal or external. We're looking for the best design for work and matching work to experts and resources in order to optimize shareholder and customer value. Did I just lose all of you guys? I'm seeing eyes glaze over. It's like, oh, really? I really wanted to talk about internal and external. That's kind of the framework that we're going to move forward with. But really, what we're talking about here is. The crowd is basically a global pool of expert resources Those resources are individuals, they're universities, they're corporations, they're startups, but it spans the full range of human resourcing and sourcing, and then the rest of the world, right? Everything is fair game as far as we're concerned. Cool? All right, we are moving on, cooking with gas. So we talked about this, we've talked a lot about this, right? So it's an evolution, right? And if we just kind of bring it home to GE, right, in our journey, 130 years ago, we started our journey, right? We have a long and very proud history of building new IP, developing and commercializing innovation within our company. Historically, generally speaking, that is largely defined by closed resourcing systems, right? We hire great talent, we build IP, we commercialize IP, and we're really good stewards of IP, meaning we protect it. We build it and we protect it. And so, fast forward to today, the world is a very different place. The ability to access talent and technology and solutions is much more efficient, right? If we think about the marketplace for talent, the marketplace for solutions, it's a much more efficient marketplace. You can kind of create IP and expertise, if you will, much more efficiently. And frankly, I think you need to, because markets are moving fast. We all need to move fast. We all need to move with great efficiency in order to commercialize value for our customers and our shareholders. So we have the ability today to step up this curve to open innovation, crowdsourcing, expertise on demand. We can kind of look past that, and we can think about how we integrate. We talked about integration. How do we step beyond project-based open innovation, taking that out to the external crowd, taking that to our internal crowd? How do we think beyond the project? Start to think about how we start to, integrate these tools systemically into the way we resource our ongoing business operations, right? So integrating the external crowd activities with the internal crowd activities. They're no longer kind of on that side of the plate or this side of the plate. We start to mix the peas and the corn on the plate and say, okay, external crowd, you start to mix it up with the internal crowd and drive greater value. We start to crowd power business activities by blurring the boundaries between the external crowd and the internal crowd. And then if we start to really kind of think beyond that, and start to think about what we can learn from allocating work to the external crowd, allocating work to the internal crowd, and start to learn about the performance and the behaviors of those operating systems, and build basically routines and rules and better decision-making tools, we can start to see the future of work, right? That is powered by the crowd, whether that's internal or external. It is powered by the cloud, right? Whether that's technology or talent. Think about this elastic access to technology and talent, right? Equally so. And basically informed and fueled and governed by AI, because it becomes a learning system, because it's done systemically. Does that make sense? Yeah. Good so far? All right. So there is it's a long journey, right? All of us are at different places on that journey. All of us want to be at different places. Maybe not all of us want to be at that cloud AI. Maybe we just want a more efficient way to access the external crowd. Or maybe we just want a more efficient way to engage with our internal crowds. And that's all good. It's just a matter of accessing the right talent for the right mission for your business, for your organizational ID. What defines an optimal resourcing strategy for you? So that I guess, gets us back to how you want to organize the way that you access the crowd. Whether the crowd is external, whether the crowd is internal. You have to think about the talent markets, right? The crowds that you're going to engage that are a good complement or resource for the kind of work that you need to do for your business. The process by which you're going to engage the crowds, whether they're external or internal. And then the platforms, right? Platforms are enablers. They're going to give you that way to digitally access expertise and solutions in a way that is compliant and scalable. So you have to think about the entire kind of operating system in order to access the external crowd and the internal crowd. That said, the external crowd, there are pros and cons, right? So getting back to the internal versus external crowd discussion. Again, I tend to think about the world blurred into kind of one crowd, one universal crowd, just with a lot of personas and segments within it. But if you force me to talk about kind of external versus internal crowd, and really start to kind of create based on our observations of internal crowd strengths and potentially gaps, external crowd strengths and gaps, in how we can construct internal and external crowd solutions that drive the best business outcome. When we put these programs together, when we're working with the internal crowds, we have to consciously kind of design the programs assuming that there is a fair amount of kind of bias, right? So when we're working with the internal crowds, again, we've talked about it here, but internal crowds, our employees, right, our teams are all, they're very successful in their fields. They have these strong professional identities, right, that we talked about. They have their own language and they have their own set of biases, right, that are kind of hard-coded in through years and years of experience within our organization, right? All of those biases, that language, the kind of talk and code, and we have to solve for that when we're solving our crowdsourcing programs using internal crowds, knowing that there are some blinders that have to be kind of that are going to manifest themselves in the results that internal crowd might produce. And that's okay. That's fine. It's just you're going to get a better outcome if you know that those exist, right? And you can design around them. On the flip side of that, when we're going to external crowds, same thing. They don't necessarily always have perfect context for what our business needs. So if we're taking a business problem out to the external crowd, we have to think about how to frame the problem in such a way that they can give us the best possible solutions that are going to be valuable when we take them back into our own operations and try to integrate them. Otherwise, a lot of good stuff is going to end up on the cutting room floor when we take it from the crowd and try to hand it to our business teams, right? So the external crowds don't always have the full context of how we're going to operationalize their solutions when they hand them to us. They don't have perfect information. So we have to think about how we can educate the external crowd so that their that translation of value is as high, as it possibly can be. So you have to be really. We've talked a lot about communications and language, right, and framing the problem. That's super important. We think of our roles really in no small part as translators, right? When we're moving from kind of one group to another, so that we can try to increase the kind of the information that is held by all, so that we can get better outcomes from internal and external crowds. So internal crowds, I think, we're solving for some of the biases and rigidity and kind of language issues when we're working with internal crowds, and kind of that a little bit more of an insulated view of the world. When we're working with external crowds, we're largely solving for context and distribution of information and translating what the world can bring in terms of solutions, and trying to translate those solutions to our business applications. So it's we talked about ambidexterity. We talked about kind of translation of terms. Those it is creating a solving for those borders that exist today and trying to disappear those borders in language and actions and information flow. Make sense? So we try to build a balanced portfolio of working equally with our internal and our external crowds. We also try to establish an external crowd relationship with external crowds that not only mirror the internal crowds that we have, so we try to create a kind of a digital twin of our internal crowd in terms of skill sets and experience in our external crowds, but we also try to create a complement. So we might have a shallower bench for AI internally, as an example, because that's kind of an emerging capability. We might look for more skills in our external crowds in that area so that we can kind of equalize our access to expertise. So we try to create external crowd that is a strong complement to our internal team. Good so far? I know I'm blowing through this stuff, but I just want to make sure. Yeah, question?
Yeah, I was just curious. So how do you validate the skills of the external crowd to know if they're comparable and capable like your internal crowd?
It's a great question. We actually, a couple of ways, right? So we validate through observation. So first and foremost, so when we're publishing projects and publishing work, then the conversation that ensues, or the conversation that we have with the external experts and the work that they produce is that's evidence of the quality, right, of their expertise. We also vet the external experts. So we'll do at the beginning of a project, there is an acknowledgement of terms. At the end of a project, we might do vetting of not only the work that they do, but also them as individuals, to make sure that we're not doing business with people that you wouldn't want to do business with. But then most importantly, we rely on our partners, right? Our partners have communities of the world's best minds, right? And the world's best talent, right? So partners like Top Coder, we know are, the global elite. They are the home of the global elite. And that's proven out through so much. There's such a volume of work. So again, you kind of monitor that in aggregate in the relationships that you have, the platform relationships, and you monitor it at the work level, and the individual level. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
It's a good question, because it's a huge risk when you're dealing with kind of folks on the inside that are sponsoring work, and you're suggesting that they take that work outside to people that they may never meet. It's a huge risk if they're not really comfortable with the tools.
Yeah, and that, the question we always have is, how would you really take the exact same scope of work that you normally do internally and send it out, even if it's at a higher skill level, or would you reserve the lower skill level work to crowdsource, or the exact opposite, or maybe there's something very specialized that you might want to crowdsource because you don't have the capability internally.
Yeah, it's we've found that some folks internally are more comfortable with pushing out some of their more strategic and higher value work to external crowds, and other folks internally are less comfortable pushing some of their more strategic and more sensitive work out to external crowds. So a lot of that depends on the comfort level and the maturity of the work sponsor. We know how to solve for all levels, even from a process perspective, but a lot of that depends on the behaviors of the work sponsor too. Yeah, it's a really good point.
So the professor before had asked the question of who the ball company or corporation is. Who is GE now?
I was hoping I wasn't gonna get this question. Yeah, GE is growing and evolving, just like everybody else.
Yeah.
GE is a digital industrial company, right? And GE is really revisiting our organizational identity, right? And we in the past have been an industrial conglomerate, and then over the past 10 years we've made a very strong investment in becoming a digital industrial conglomerate. And now we are recognizing that we can drive more value for our customers and our shareholders if we start to focus in and specialize and basically enable our business units that are dedicated to certain industries to focus on those industries rather than trying to hold all of these tethers, these connections at the company level. We can be stronger as focused business units.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Did that work?
Yeah, sure.
I'm testing it out.
I was just curious.
Don't tell Sean.
There's aerospace, there's energy, there's oil
Yeah,
and gas.
power, aviation, yeah, healthcare is, we're spinning out transportation, healthcare, spinning out oil and gas, right? So renewables, power, and aviation.
I have a question going back to what you said about being an excellent steward of IP. So I work at Appliances, so
Awesome.
and I understand that. I see that all the time. The patents that they can file.
Yeah.
Is there a conflict internally when you talk about sending this to an external crowd? You find that people push back and say
Never.
about the IP they're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do you manage that? Like, how do you mitigate that tension of what about our IP? What about how are we?
Yeah, a great question. IP is the first question I ever get.
Yeah.
Ever, and I'm sure I'm the only one who has ever gotten that question. Yeah, no, it's the not invented here, right? You're going to run fast and loose with our corporate IP. You're going to engage with experts that are working for our competition, right? All of the doom and gloom types of, and they're real risks and they're real concerns. They're valid concerns. The key is, for what has worked for us, is that when we made the decision to build basically a corporate service operation focused on crowdsourcing and open innovation, our first calls were to the corporate IP team, and we've worked in very close partnership the entire time with the IP Council, with our labor and employment, right? So I've built kind of industrial scale processes that borrow heavily from all the IP stewardship best practices that we had in place. But I've worked with the teams to tailor our processes so that we can open up in a very structured way. We can open up to external collaborators in order to get very well-defined work done. So just as an example, we might take teams often come to us because they want to develop a new market strategy, right? So if we were to just kind of broadcast that to the world, then our competitors would know that we're moving into a new market. So what we do is we do quiet work. And that means we do the research and exploration on a non-disclosed basis, not disclosing that this is GE doing this exploration, or we secure a channel. So we set up, a set of external experts, an external crowd that is heavily NDA'd. There are a lot of ways that you can kind of create a really protected space where you can collaborate with external crowds. There's been a lot of, I think, good thinking and work done with hybrid crowds, right? Working with non-employees, but you can structure a way to bring them behind your firewalls and give them badging so that they can work as an extension of your team, but they're not your employees. So there are just really thoughtful ways, if you break down the work into kind of a more atomic kind of definition, there are ways to put work back together and engage resources, whether they're external or internal, to drive a better business outcome. Yeah. Actually, that's a good segue to this page, and I'll be super fast. Our network of partners and experts, through folks like Top Coder and InnoCentive and 9 Sigma and Upwork, we have a lot of really, really great partners that that we've learned from over the years. Give us direct reach today to external experts, 21 million external experts within our network of partnerships, including our own employees. And if you start to break down that team, right, our internal and our external experts based on their areas of interest and expertise, we define our networks on a skills level. So that's the reason the right side of this page doesn't add up to 21 million, because we have experts that might be good in brand and AI, right? So we can go to them for both brand and AI. So if you start to think about the world at the skills level, no longer one job to one FTE, but it's one task to one skill, a lot more kind of optionality opens up to you, right? A lot more capacity opens up to you. So that's kind of how we look at the world in terms of our crowds and how we can get work done and put it together. So just real quick, a couple of pages. So this was our year last year. As for reference, I have a team of 4, a mighty team of 4. We have a network, direct access to 21 million experts. We typically will run about 150 to 200 programs per year, CrowdPower programs per year. Last year, for the customers that internal and external customers that we supported with CrowdPower programs, we were able to help them achieve over $5 billion of business impact with those 175 projects. And on average, we track speed, cost, and quality and optionality, and also kind of business value of the outcomes that we help our customer achieve. Generally speaking, we're able to help teams accelerate speed by up to 50%. In some cases, it may be over 90%. Optionality is big for us. It's not kind of common vernacular, but optionality is absolutely critical.
Which means?
Optionality means rather than one engineer, if you have a team of engineers, let's say you have a team of 1 engineer, right, and you need to get a jet engine done, they might be able to push 5 designs out in a week. If instead that 1 engineer frames a problem statement, and you push that problem statement out to an external expert community of mechanical engineers and designers, that 1 engineer may be able to produce 200 designs in a week if they're working with a team of experts, external experts. So that's optionality. You're basically amplifying the
Number of options.
Exactly, your network. Exactly. So this is it. Yeah, I'm stopping. So I just wanted to, these are some of our case studies. I didn't want to kind of get into the detail. I just wanted to show you we have forced ourselves to apply crowdsourcing to the full spectrum of work that is done by our teams. We've tested the boundaries of what you can do with a crowd, and hopefully you can see some of the headlines on the page. There really is very little that you can't do with a crowd. It's just a matter of aligning a thoughtful collaboration between internal, external experts, or internal and other internal experts, in order to derive a better business outcome. So with that, that's it. It's not internal or external, it's internal and external.
Quick, thank you for the presentation. Quick question. As you were building processes, how have you put in the transition or integration with your internal systems as part of that, right? Something that we've heard so far is we send to the crowd, we get something, and we have a product. And as an end consumer within a company or corporation, for us is, well, no, that's not the product. The product is when it reaches the hands of the potential use. That's when you get that 5 billion back.
Right, right.
So how did you go through that process? How does that look?
Yeah, it's a great question, and probably a good question for margaritas afterwards, but that transition from the crowd to kind of operationalization is not an easy one. A lot of stuff ends up on the cutting room floor. We always try to design with kind of the operationalization in mind, and we try to involve at the beginning of the program the folks that are going to be responsible for commercializing. And whether we're asking for a commercial-ready solution or if we're just asking for ideas, our approach to program design doesn't change. We still try to find the folks who own the operationalization of whatever the crowd is going to produce. And that helps us design a better transition from the crowd into kind of customers' hands. All right,
Thank you,
thanks,
Dyan.
everyone.
All right, shifting gears again, we've got one last session